am back and I have some creepy stories for you. I'm kind of excited to read these, but also really terrified. This says 19 people who encountered serial killers and lived to tell the tale. Like, I know these are gonna scar me for life, but I also have to know what happened to every single person. Number 1, during my second year of teaching, there was a long-term sub across the hall from me that I had a good relationship with, and he always came to me for help when he needed it. He was a former college football star at our local university and was a volunteer coach for the football program at a nearby high school. On the last day of school, the day after students left and we were all wrapping things up before leaving for summer, we walked past each other in the hallway and I greeted him by simply saying, "What's up, Mr. Johnson?" Not a word back from him. He didn't even look at me, just had a 1,000-yard stare down the other end of the hallway. 2 days later, I turned on the news and the headlining story was local substitute teacher arrested for triple murder. He had killed his own son, niece, and brother later that day that I last saw him in that hallway. Oh my God. No, because I know all of these are going to be so terrifying and for some reason, I'm like, I have to read them. This is such a bad idea. My dad believed he had the Zodiac killer as a patient way back in the early 70s when he was an active killer. My dad's practice was in Richmond, California, in the eastern half of the San Francisco Bay Area. This patient was always the last patient of the day. He was always talking about the case, bragging about all of the weapons he had, or he even resembled the sketch of him. Dad was a first lieutenant, infantry, tail end of World War II, and did not scare. The patient, though, gave my dad the creeps. Finally, my dad gave the cops a sample of this patient's handwriting. Shortly after this, he stopped being seen by my dad. Number 3, when I was a teen, from 16 to 18 years old, I worked at a local grocery store on the front end. There was this incredibly creepy guy who was about my dad's age, so almost 30 years older than me, who used to come in every day to get cigarettes and Lotto. He was constantly asking me and every other young female working if we wanted to come to his house and party. He said he had weed and would get whatever booze we wanted. Nobody ever took him up on it. He had this gaze that you could feel even if your back was turned and would make really sleazy comments to and about us, and acted as if we should have been flattered by the attention. This was in the late 90s. Turns out he was arrested about 5 years ago for the murder of 15-year-old Tracy Gilpin in 1986 when he was about 30 years old. Look him up, Michael Hand. You'll see exactly how creepy he still looks. How is he out of prison? That's like, how are these people getting out of prison? I don't understand. I was in Denver with my ex a few years back. We had just gotten out of the light rail maybe 5 or 6 blocks from our Airbnb, and there was a guy trying to get a ticket for the train. As we were walking past, he explained he was like 50 cents short and asked if we could spare some change. All I had was a 5. I handed to him and realized as he was grabbing the cash that he had blood splattered on his hand. I look up and make eye contact and he had more blood splattered on his face and a huge grin. Time stopped for a second and then he asked me if I wanted my change. I told him no, grabbed my ex by the hand and started hurrying away looking over my shoulder every few seconds. He stood still as a statue watching us walk away until we turned a corner. We found a church and hunkered down in the doorway and called an Uber for the remaining 4-block walk to our room. The next day we were flying out and saw a news story about a murder that happened in the neighborhood we were staying in that night. Someone was stabbed to death near the train tracks at around 10 p.m. We got off the train around 11. I can't confirm, but I may have met a murderer and given him $5 to help evade the scene. Oh my God, I would never be able to sleep ever again. I would never. Also, you couldn't have washed the blood off. I don't know, what are you doing? Okay, basically, back in the 80s, my mom lived in a bedsit, which is basically shared accommodation for those who don't know, and had some guy knock on the door around 11 p.m. All the other young women she lived with had went out earlier in the evening to go drinking, but my mom had stayed back due to work the next day. My mom, being the wise person she is, thank God, otherwise I probably wouldn't be here today typing this, didn't open the door to him, but opted to shout out the window asking who it was. Some dude was stood there with a baseball cap on, briefcase in hand, and insisted he had a business meeting with the business below the bedsit. Throughout the conversation, he refused to look directly up at her and didn't want to leave. My mom thought this was strange, especially at 11 p.m. at night, so effectively told him to go away and contact whoever he was supposed to be meeting. She reported it to the police. Turns out it was the bedsit killer, and my mom could have potentially been his next victim that night. She got a call back in 2021 from detectives saying they'd remanded a man on suspicion of the R-word and killing of 2 women back in the 80s through DNA. Someone in his family, I believe, got put on file, and that's how they eventually made the crucial link. And they highly suspected he was the man on the doorstep that night from descriptions in her report and wanted to use it as evidence in court. My mom lived one road over from one of the victims who coincidentally shared the same name as her and looked really similar. We got invited to the sentencing at court and managed to see him in the dock, and my mom thought it was definitely the man from that night. He got a whole life sentence for the murder and other crimes. I won't go into it, but when they arrested him for the murders and searched his property back in 2021, they unveiled evidence that he had been abusing bodies in a mortuary in the hospital he worked at for years. Oh my god. Oh my god, these are like, I've already said it. I know they're gonna be bad, and they are bad. They're so bad. Oh my god, what the fuck? My grandparents bought their house in Tacoma, Washington from Ted Bundy's great uncle. They were apparently super close, and Ted spent a lot of time at their house when he was a kid. I only found this out recently, and it's a little disconcerting to think that around the same time Ted Bundy was killing dozens of women, I was a toddler spending weekends with my grandma in his old house. Oh, I hope they sold the house. I hope they left. Oh my god, how are they living there? I guess they didn't know, but how are you living there? How did you ever live there? Oh my god. I had a run-in not so long ago. A man almost ran into me and looked me dead in the eyes, then suddenly laid down on the sidewalk directly in front of me. My initial reaction was trying to help him, but something was holding me back. I had a really bad feeling about him, so I was stuck in a dilemma of wanting to help him, but also having a bad gut feeling about it. Eventually I went my way and felt horrible, but a week later, this man randomly killed 3 women and injured 9, including a child. He just snapped and stabbed them for nothing. They also said he had a misogynistic motive. So to this day, I'm grateful I for once didn't try to help. God knows what he would have done. I just am like, how did you hurt so many people? Like that's crazy to me that he killed 3 women and injured 9. Like, what was he? I get he stabbed them. He had a knife. Oh my god, I'm just like, that's nuts. Like, how do you do all at once? Oh my god, that's like so fucking scary to me. My mom went on a blind date, oh god, and got weird vibes, so she ghosted. A few years later, he was on the news for killing 8 people, his ex-girlfriend and her whole family, before dying himself. She still remembers him talking about this canoe that he made and he was proud of, and then seeing it in his front lawn in the news coverage. I am never going on a date ever again. I'm sorry, I'm just not, because of that story. My sister used to work as a security guard at a mall in Colorado. When she was just leaving work at 3 p.m. in the afternoon one day, a strange man comes up to her asking if he can use her phone. She points over to a public phone and tells him he can use that one. He insists on using her phone, and when she denied him a second time, he pulls out a gun at her and tells her to drive him somewhere. She immediately gets into the vehicle and drives with him in the passenger seat, having no idea where he's going to direct her. Oh my god. After driving 15-ish minutes, he then tells her to pull over to the side of the road, proceeds to take her purse, wedding ring, and key to the car, and tells her to get in the trunk. So she does what he asks. For whatever reason, the trunk was not locked, and so while he's just barely hitting the gas to go, she manages to jump out of the car. They're going about 20 miles per hour. Later, after finding that the guy had smashed the car into the side of the road, the police find him and also find out he had just killed a 70-year-old man after stealing his money. I don't know what I would do without my big sister. She's the light of my life, as well as her 2 beautiful children. No, same. I'm like so glad she realized the trunk wasn't locked. That is, I would just accept my fate. I would just never think to act. Honestly, I'm just an idiot. I accidentally met Jeffrey Dahmer in Milwaukee the summer before he was caught. It was late at night and I was drunk and lost. My friends were going to school in Milwaukee and I came up to visit. He pulled up and offered a ride and a telephone back at his apartment to give them a call. I jumped in and started having a super creepy vibe from him. I got to his apartment and he offered a beer before the phone. It just all felt as creepy as could be. I literally ran out the door and down the street as fast as I could. He chased me for about half a block, but he couldn't keep up. Oh my god, you were his next victim. That's not even just a run-in. You were literally going to be his next victim. Okay, we're on number 11. My cousin was at his wife's, then girlfriend's house watching movies one night while her parents were out of town, when suddenly the phone starts ringing. My cousin's girlfriend goes over and answers it, and it's her uncle asking to talk to her parents. He sounds super freaked out, so she's asking him what's wrong. He tells her the police had just left his house. She starts worrying and pushes a little bit further. Turns out her uncle lived in Jeffrey Dahmer's old home, and he had told the police he had buried some bodies there. So the police go and knock in on his door and tell him they have to dig in his backyard and explain why. Of course, he's already freaked out enough by the idea that he's living in Jeffrey Dahmer's old house. He had just recently been arrested at this point, but it was made much worse by the fact that the police really did find some bodies back there. My cousin went on to work with some kind of church program, and part of his job was to send Bibles to repenting prisoners, and he ended up sending Jeffrey Dahmer a Bible because he wished to repent for his sins so that he could go to heaven after he was given the death penalty. I'm sorry, that is delusion. I'm sorry, that is fucking delusion. I don't care what anyone says, that is delusional. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness as a kid. That thing where they go around knocking on doors to preach to you. I was doing that with my mom and a few others. We walked up this slanted driveway with trees around each side. They couldn't see my mom and me from the street in the car. We knocked on the door, everything was normal. Except this time, I got hit by something I couldn't see. My ears started ringing and buzzing like crazy. It felt like a helmet had been put on. My body was screaming at me to leave. The man listened to my mom's intro, then said he was interested in hearing more and invited us in like some do. All those things got so much stronger. The air felt like it got dense to keep me from moving. My mom looked at me and she said I looked off, pale and distant. She told him I seemed to be ill and that we should just leave. As soon as we stepped onto the ground in view of the car, I was completely fine. My mom decided to take me home anyways. We lived 2 blocks away, luckily. A few days later, we read in the paper about how the man was arrested for the R word and murder of a few women. I think one of them was as young as 16. I was 12 at the time. My mom, dutiful witness she was at the time, was convinced the angel stepped in to protect us. Was he out, or did he get arrested after the fact? I think he had gotten out, which is insane. How do you ever see the light of day ever again for doing something like that? Way back when, my boyfriend at the time, myself, and a few friends hung out one Saturday. My one friend didn't speak much, just a pretty nondescript 20-year-old guy. It turned out that he went to his ex-girlfriend's house the following Friday on Halloween, stabbed her 34 times, and then disappeared. They found his body 2 weeks later in a forest where he had hung himself, still in his costume. Oh my god. Oh my god, so they hung out with him and he was so off because he was plotting. Jesus Christ. Okay, 14 is really short. It just says my grandpa once bought shoes from John Gacy, which is crazy, but very, very short and very what? Okay, I need more details. My wife and I were camping on the Oregon coast and jogged through a guy's campsite that he'd set up on the trail down to the beach. On the way back to our campsite, I jogged a little bit ahead of my wife and she was really upset that I didn't stay with her, as I would be too. She said the guy looked really creepy. We got back to Eugene and got a call from the state police asking if we saw anything strange. We gave an update about the guy camping above the beach and asked why they were calling. They said someone had drowned an off-duty policewoman in a tidal pool, cut their tent lines, and stolen her car. Turned out to be a serial killer who had been killing people while traveling across the country. They caught him in Southern California a few weeks later. No, because I would be even more pissed if I found out that this guy was a serial killer and you couldn't just keep my pace. You had to jog ahead of me. Oh my god, I would that would be it for me. That would be my final straw, because I'm sure he did other shit wrong. Oh, I'd be so mad at that. And then these last few stories, it says, and finally let's end on a handful of stories where we don't know for sure if these people encountered killers, but it sure sounds like it. This was a few years ago now, maybe 2019. I worked in a bar and there was this guy who'd come in occasionally with his family, parents and siblings. I think he was about 25, really nice guy. We had immediate chemistry. He was in the army and he was home and visited my work and I was just finishing my shift. Asks me if I feel like going for a few drinks. He wasn't a complete stranger and the other staff knew him, so I agreed. We went to a cocktail bar nearby and then he suggested going to his for a few drinks. He had a bar in his house. My first mistake was agreeing, but I was 19. I was just happy to go along with things. Anyway, all's going good. We're getting along fine and having a good night, and the more he drank, things began to change. He was telling me horrific stories about things he had seen while serving. Throughout the night, the look in his eyes began to change. I suppose it sounds cliche, but there's no other way to describe it. He had a bit of madness in them, which he previously didn't have. He was giving me loads of drinks and started offering to buy me drugs. I declined. I started to feel uneasy and texted my best friend saying I didn't feel right. He lived around the corner and said if I needed to leave, he would meet me. I'm timing when I'm going to leave. It's 5 a.m. at this point. I was going to be polite and finish my drink and then thank him and head out, meet my friend, and go home. Then he starts talking about killing people and how he would go about it. He tells me that he would meet a girl, get to know her, make her feel comfortable, and like he wasn't a threat. Then he would take her out for drinks and back to his for more, get her really drunk, Something clicked for me at this point, and it was exactly the things he had done with me thus far. Except I, thankfully, can handle my drink, so I wasn't drunk. At this point, he looked completely different. Like, his face had changed completely. He looked sinister. He told me about how he would do the deed. The knife he specifically showed me when we first caught to his favorite cooking knife apparently, and how he would cover the room we were in with plastic so nothing had evidence when he went to work on dismembering. When I asked what he would do with the body parts, he pointed out the oil drum he had in the back garden and smiled smugly. Everything in my body was screaming at me that I needed to leave, so I texted my best friend and literally sprinted out. He cussed me out as I did and slammed the door so hard it shook. My friend held me while I sobbed. I got in at about 6:30 and blocked him on everything. Bitch, oh my god, you literally have to tell the police. I don't care how long ago that was, you have to tell the police. He was describing in detail your murder. He was describing in detail how he would kill you. Specifically you. That was, oh my god. I don't even know what I would do. I just don't think I can handle being in that situation, ever. I was installing a camera in a customer's home with another guy at work. The wife of the couple we were installing for began the appointment by ranting about the White House. It was her husband though. The way he looked at both my coworker and I was like a person staring through me, like he knew he was looking at me but didn't see me. In his garage, where we were mounting the camera, this guy with the dead eyes closed the garage door, looks at me for a long 5-second stretch, then says, "Yep, over there is where we let them suffer before we gotta cut the heads off." Gotta let them suffer before cutting the heads off. Like he repeats himself? I don't know. He locked the outside garage door, turns around, and just starts murmuring about cutting off heads again. He must have brought up murder 5 to 8 times in a 10-minute stretch. They call me Sergeant, something I forgot. I replied, "Thank you for your service. I really admire veterans." He looked at me with those dead eyes. I was never in the military. Long stretch of silence. His wife called him on his iWatch. "Everything okay down there? Anybody up to something?" Long stretch before he replies, "Everything's fine. We're just in the garage. Everybody's here and we're fine. I'll call you if I need you." It was like they were talking about something they didn't want us to hear. My coworker and I kept our scissors and razors in our hands from about 5 minutes into the service call for the rest of the way, neither of us letting him be behind us where we couldn't see him. After we mounted the camera, he asked us to go through the house back to the panel. There was no way in hell I was doing that, so I said, "We need to take the ladder back to the car." He said we could take it through the house. Remember, he had closed and locked the outside garage earlier. I said it was a safety hazard and needed to go out the big garage door. Once more, he asked us to go through the house, to which I replied we couldn't do that because of company policy with the outdoor ladder. He stared at me for roughly 5 to 10 seconds in silence, then went and opened the garage door. Both of us split out of there and didn't look back. Told the company, locked the account, and wondered if we should have called the cops. I have no idea what would have happened to my coworker had he showed up there alone. He was supposed to be alone. I randomly picked that day to audit him. Both of us swear up and down he felt like he was looking at something less than human and worthy of killing when he looked at us. Creepiest thing I've ever been around. Okay, and we have 2 more. I got into an Uber in Florida driven by a really old, really big burly guy. Chat starts off normal, but then he quickly starts talking about his time in the military. I asked him, "What did you do?" And he says, "I used to jump out of planes and kill people." Fine, just classic veteran talk, right? He then starts talking about in his later years of service, he got a degree in psychology and started doing forensic work for the military, and that he's always been fascinated in serial killers. He goes on to say he would go back to do a PhD in what makes a serial killer. Again, this could all be normal, but he then starts mumbling about how if they had known what makes a serial killer when he was young, they might have helped someone like him. He also dropped a bunch of lines like, "You should know how to kill anyone you meet within 10 seconds while staring at me in the mirror." He pulled out this huge knife from his glove box while driving. It was his alligator skinning knife. He also made quite a few unsettling comments about women we passed on the road as if he was fantasizing about them. I started to get this real fear that he genuinely was a serial killer in his younger days. Florida has quite a few cold cases dating back to the 80s. He was immensely strong for his age. I'm a large guy and I could feel his strength in his handshake. That, plus all the weird fascinations with serial killers, it could have been PTSD, but I couldn't wait to get out of that car even though it was broad daylight with plenty of traffic. No, I would end the ride. Okay, and finally, last one, I found a piece of furniture on Craigslist that I wanted to buy. Agreed to meet the guy outside of his house to inspect and pick up. When I arrived, he wasn't outside. Rung the doorbell, he answers and invites me in. tells me the furniture is in the basement. Without leading me to it, he points to the door to his basement and tells me to go have a look. I notice the basement door has a lock and deadbolt. My internal subconscious alarm bells immediately begin screaming at me to leave. I'm a 5'10" male in good shape, but I still wouldn't be able to bust down a dead-bolted door. I thanked him for his time and promptly left. Or fled. I actually can't believe like any of those stories. And I was just thinking, I don't know what's worse, like knowing you actually ran into a serial killer or not knowing if who you were running into was one. But obviously running into an actual like known serial killer is so much worse, because then it's like, I'm talking, because you were like in real danger. Like you could kind of put the other ones just as like weird encounters with really weird people. Obviously you feared for your life, and like that should never happen in like a normal human interaction. So those are still terrifying, but like knowing I like ran into Ted Bundy as a child, I could never live with that. But that's all I have for now. I hope you guys enjoyed. If for some reason you have any stories like this, I'll have my subreddit link down below, but I'm like praying that you don't. Although I feel like people have told me stories about running into like serial killers. I think I have a whole video on it. Like you guys telling me about that. I don't know, I can't really remember, but I'm almost positive you guys have told me stories like that. Anyways, I'm gonna go. I love you guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye. I don't think I have anything to ramble about because I saw Saw. I saw Saw. I hate that. I hate that so much. Saw. I saw the new Saw movie on like, I don't know, what, fucking Friday. And yesterday, Monday, yesterday, Monday. Oh my God, what is wrong with me? Monday and Tuesday of this week, I watched all the Saw movies because I had to. I literally had to. But I watched them out of order. Don't ask why. I'll tell you why. I saw a TikTok basically saying that the sixth one was like it had one of their favorite traps in it. And I think I told you guys in my last video, sometimes I get the last like 4 through 7 kind of jumbled up. And so I wasn't sure what trap they were talking about. And so I went to watch 6. And then obviously I had to watch 7, but then I was like, wait, I kind of want to watch 4 and 5 too. So then I watched 4 and then I watched 5. So I watched 6, 7, then 4, 5, and then I was like, okay, well now I have to watch the second one because I like the second one a lot. So I watched the second one and then I watched the first one, and today I'm probably going to watch the third. I don't know why I'm watching them like that. I really don't know, but I didn't expect to watch every single one. That's actually why. I just like I needed to watch all of them, but I think I have it in order now. I think I know. Like, I think I can, like, make a distinction between 4 through 7 now, but it's probably gonna leave me, because I just watched them, so it's fresh, but it's probably gonna leave me again, because they do really get jumbled up. But yeah, I don't really have anything to ramble about other than that. What? I'm gonna go. I love you guys so much. See you.